Hello, everyone. I just wanted to do a separate introduction to this week's episode. This week's episode was an absolute cracker. I feel you're going to get a lot of benefit of it in terms of career progression gains and growth. And just to do a little pre-intro here, we're going to do various different shows. We're going to do really technical ones, whether that's on bug bounty, post-exploitation, popping shells, building your own C2 frameworks. We're also going to do different ones on general refining and improving your communication skills. We're going to do ones on dealing with end clients. We're basically going to do every different type of show that helps and aids and facilitates your career growth as a penetration tester. And this week's one was a great one because we really get into the depths of how important the communication skills are. At one point, I was mentioning how you can be fantastic at finding various different vulnerabilities, whether that's cross-site scripting, SQLi, or whatever it might be. If you can't articulate yourself well in a written report format, if you can't communicate well to end clients, if you don't quite know how to improve your communication skills when dealing with technical or maybe non-technical stakeholders, if you're having issues in any of those areas, that will stunt and hold back your career growth as a penetration tester. And something that's probably not talked about too much in pen testing, a big bulk of the job is report writing. A big bulk of the job is making people and customers and clients realize that it makes sense to fix the vulnerabilities that you find. So anyway, enough from me. I'm going to let you listen to the show. The thoughts, views, opinions that are expressed within this podcast episode are not necessarily that of the organizations that me and my guest are a part of. Enjoy it. Please listen carefully. There's lots and lots of golden nuggets in here that will really help your career grow. Enjoy. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show, the Pen Tester Recruiter podcast. Today's Good Friday in the UK, and got a good show installed today. I hope everyone's looking forward to it. I know I am. We've got Gretchen D. Ruck on the show. Hi, Gretchen. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for inviting me on. And a piece of trivia is that it's actually Good Friday in the United States as well today.
Very
So not
good.
just in the UK.
Yeah, very good. And we're both working, so bonus points for us, hey?
It's like I'm more concerned about Passover than Good Friday, but my salute goes out to those celebrating any of the spring holidays, and I hope you're enjoying your time wherever you may be.
Very good, very good. So I'm going to give Gretchen a bit of an introduction. Her career spans around 3 decades. She's advised clients at Gartner, KPMG, Alice Partners, Tony Scott Group, and she's a senior managing director in Ankura's cybersecurity and data privacy practice. She's also been involved with work with the UN and the White House. Her presentations, events, and contributions have been featured in Bloomberg, the Financial Times, USA Today, and even she managed to make her way into the dictionary, which we're going to hear more about in just a moment. But Gretchen, I've done you a little bit of an introduction. I could never do it as well as you could. Welcome to the show, and can you give us a little bit of more of an insight into yourself?
Sure. Thanks so much for inviting me on. I really appreciate the chance to speak with you and be part of your new podcast. It's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I've spent the last, let's say, 25 years mixed in consulting and in industry, a couple industries in particular, such as financial services and doing work with governments, things like that. But doing a lot of work where advising folks when it comes to areas around like data protection, around data privacy, and overall like cybersecurity. So really, a lot of my specialty is in helping folks with risk management, understanding really what the risks are and how to not understand just what they are within, for example, the security practice, but how those things really impact the business, because that's really the big questions. In particular, I'd say the last 10 years, I've really focused on taking the discussions around risks and value for cybersecurity and for privacy from backroom discussions like in rooms filled with servers to boardroom discussions filled with executives, filled with investors and folks like that. And that's a big difference. And it shows a difference in our industry. It shows a difference in where we have to sell this kind of work in order for folks to really appreciate it and to engage with it.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
definitely, definitely. Yeah,
so
sorry, Gretchen.
if I can address the dictionary comment, uh,
Yeah,
back,
please.
back a couple of years ago, I was giving a quote related to the Equifax incident that had been going on, which was a big deal. And so I was talking with a reporter about open source software and what the values are, because it's some folks think of open source as maybe being primarily a thing that's dangerous, but generally, depending on the type, it can give you access to things such as source code, so you can do your own testing if you have the capabilities and the wherewithal. So my comment about source code wound up in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. So if you go online and look at the dictionary, they have, for most definitions, they have recent usage on the web. And they turn those over every like 6 months to every year. I was Googling something about my name just to see where something was listed. And I said, wait, this is the dictionary. And so they pulled this quote from the USA Today article. And so it sat online in Merriam Webster for a year. And for a year, I was like, if anybody wants to know anything, this is the only thing I care about, is that my name was in the dictionary. Because I feel
Yeah.
like, of any other accomplishment I have, that's the one that's the coolest, in my opinion. Sure, I have kids, and sure, I've done some cool stuff otherwise, but a dictionary mentioning you, if anything, if a dictionary mentioned me, I thought it would be under the word gullible. But anyway, this was even better. So I'm glad you brought
Listen,
that up.
no, if you're getting in the dictionary, you're definitely doing something right. That's all I'll say.
Or something notable. Maybe it's not even right.
Interesting story. But yeah, so first question from me. I
Yeah.
know we spoke about potentially doing a bit of a masterclass episode and communicate the value of risk related to security. We talked about getting budget sign-offs and the complications there. Do you think the sheer value is sometimes missed by security folks in general and penetration testers? And how can not realizing the value of this part of the job as a penetration tester or a security professional, how can that potentially hold people back and stop them from making gains?
That's a fantastic question. Like I mentioned and we were discussing, a lot of like what I've done is try to bring discussions of security, data protection to the boardroom. And so this is not something that everybody is going to do, needs to do, but it's a really a bit more of an extreme way of trying to get folks to understand that this isn't just like a cost center. This is something that has real business impact. And from when I work with pen testers, like the pen test team that we have now where I am, or other teams outside of our firm or teams in the past, a lot of times the testers do fantastic work. And many of them are, in fact, are just happy just to do testing, not interact with clients. I'm not saying that's everyone, but there are those like that. For folks that are part of pen testing and they want to maybe do more in the upper levels, they want to get into managing more, they want to take their work in pen test and see it provide a greater value. There is generally more that folks need to learn. And I work with the head of our pen test team where I am now for the same kind of thing, where we work together to figure out how do we make sure this brings the right value to our clients? How do we get it communicated? Because when I read a pen test report, like a standard one, a lot of times I'll read them and there's really wonderful tidbits throughout the report. But I'm looking for something at the beginning that tells me, as maybe a business perspective reader, hey, so here are the things that you need to know, or here are the things that if you don't take these seriously, these are going to be the results. And so that's examples of like where all these great uncovered issues underneath, not just like finding vulnerabilities, but explaining the risk, all these things that pen testers do well. It just won't necessarily communicate up to the audience that can make the biggest difference if it's not really presented, not just in a table, but in a very brief discussion at the beginning of a report. So this is a skill that needs to be learned. And it doesn't necessarily occur naturally, but it's something important. And with this kind of skill being developed, it means that folks will start to take the pen test and they'll put it into better perspectives. They go, when is really the right time to pen test? Am I just doing it because I need to do it for my PCI DSS type certification? Or am I doing it because I really see this as important to fix the business? So those are the kinds of things that pen testers who want to put their work into bigger perspective, not just do the testing, but demonstrate the value that comes out of their work. This is the kinds of skills that they really need to pick up.
Yeah, a phrase I heard used before was allowing them to realize their value. And I think that's such a good way of putting it because they get really down and they really get annoyed if vulnerabilities aren't fixed. But is it always the end client's fault? If they're not explained correctly, I think it's definitely stuff could be done both
Oh yeah,
sides, definitely.
and I'll work with a client, and they say we need a pen test. Maybe it's a new client to me, and so of course, like there's different information that we'll gather in a sheet to understand their environment. But then we also say, can you share with us your last test? Maybe it was 3 months ago, a year ago. Maybe they don't have one, but if they do have, there could potentially have been a number of vulnerabilities. So once they give it to us, I'll ask them, hey, so these vulnerabilities, do you expect we'll find them again? Have these been addressed? And sometimes they go, well, no, I don't know. I don't think it's been addressed yet. I very much would like them to do a new pen test, and that's what they want us to do, and they want to spend money on it. But I very much also would to say, hey, maybe don't test now, but spend that same money on addressing these vulnerabilities. A pen test is not something that you're doing like assurance wise as you're hardening security, fixing security. Pen testing is a review activity. It's an important one, and I'm sure folks may want to correct me, but it's a very important activity and a very good way to catch things that could be missed otherwise. This is the kind of thing that I like when pen testers do is they take the perspective of, yeah, I'm doing this because these folks want to engage us, but let me see if they're really in the right position to do it. Let's see if they're going to find value because maybe they do need to do it, but we still want them to realize that, hey, if we're doing this now and we find those same things and maybe even more vulnerabilities and we come back again next year, it's going to be something that it makes it harder for us to partner with you.
Mm.
And we may still do, but we want to help you do more. And as a pen tester, a lot of times they get frustrated with this because they want to see their work be meaningful. I used to be an auditor for years, and I'd walk into a client smiling and ready to help them. And I really believed I was helping. And they would look at me and shoot daggers with their eyes at me because my, hey, we're the auditors, we're here to help, wasn't appreciated. And it just drags you down after a while. Same thing could be true with pen testing and just not seeing your value recognized by the folks that you're engaging with.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think next question was going to be, and I think we've partly answered it there, which is great, but getting vulnerabilities fixed 100% of the time by every end client is just the reality of that is just very challenging. Like I say, I don't know if it's always the end client's fault. Is there anything else you think pen testers could be doing to help everyone? Is there anything? Is there anything else the security world could be doing in general to make end clients do more? Would you say?
Yeah, so it's so complex nowadays. A lot of the clients that we work, some of the clients we work with are very big, but a lot of them are medium-sized to smaller-sized businesses. And if you look at an environment in one of these clients, virtually any of them, it's amazing how much of the technology that they're responsible for may not be their own technology. So our pen test may hit flaws related to components of the software that's part of their architecture, but they may not even have the wherewithal to address those. And they may work with their clients in ways that they may not even know who to reach out to at the client. So I can look at a client contract for some technical services, and I may not even see who the right person is listed to report these kinds of things. Like maybe some contracts should list out who's the person to reach to talk with when there are incidents or we think there's a suspected incident from them. Who do we talk to about vulnerabilities? Is there something in the contract that even says these folks have to address their vulnerabilities? So you could talk about technology like actively managed and controlled internally at a client, but there's so much more to it than that. And for even internally controlled at the client, especially with smaller clients, it's a matter of where do we put our time. So organizations very much want to prioritize new functionality, new platforming they may be doing, and that's great, but they may not leave time for all of the technology and security debt that could amass. And it can be frustrating. And this may be something that pen testers feel like, well, throwing their hands up in the air, there's not much we can do. And they may be right. Sometimes part of it could be on them as far as making sure folks understand what it is that they're finding and what the value is. And there's only so much you can do with that because there's still a responsibility to do configuration management, change management, all these things internal to a company that might be beyond what the testers do. One of the ways I explain security to folks outside of our area, especially non-technical folks, is
Mm.
I say that think of security as the goalie on football team or soccer
Okay.
team, if you
Yeah.
prefer. Either way, they're not the only line of defense, but what they are is the last line of defense, right? And so they and many others in the organization have to take a role in defending the organization. So a pen tester may point out these different flaws that are critical and are present high risk in combination. And they may need to work with others in the organization who are better positioned to put those front and center to get those things fixed. And that can take good vulnerability management processes. It can take good configuration management processes. The best pen tester in the world doesn't work in a silo. They're part of this, goalie function. And if other folks aren't taking a role, you just simply can't expect your goalie to stop everything that flies at you no matter what.
Mm, yeah, but yeah, no, that's a good way of putting it, Gretchen. Thanks for that. And I suppose, like you say, when it's a big organisation, if a load of vulnerabilities are found, just fixing everything. If it's a big operation, if there's multiple departments, I suppose just logistically and operationally to just stop everything and fix everything would maybe cost the business a fortune. It's just not feasible, is it? I would
Sometimes,
imagine.
sometimes that's the approach taken. It's a rare time that it happens because there needs to be something very severe. But that does happen sometimes. So my
Yeah.
my former partner and a great human being, Tony Scott, he one of the roles he served was he was actually the federal CIO under Obama. I think he was the third federal CIO, if I remember. So when
Wow.
he took the role, it was right after there's this huge OMB breach. So the federal government lost a great deal of personal information about government employees, and they were there was a lot of vulnerability, and it wasn't just related to OMB. This was a period of discovery where they went and went through looking at all the other agencies out there, the federal agencies and executive agencies, and said, "Wow, we really have 100,000 plus severe vulnerabilities across agencies." And Tony was able to put in place an edict that gave a very small time. I think it was like 90 days that you had to fix all your severe vulnerabilities or you'd be kicked off the internet. And so he made all the agencies working with the president on this stop what they were doing with technology and do this and nothing else. And they got such a large majority of them done. So that's very rare.
Yeah.
You don't
Wow.
usually go this approach.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
occasionally, if your hair's on fire enough and there's something that needs to be done right away, it can be done. But it takes certain people to act in a very heroic way to make it done. No, usually it doesn't happen. Occasionally it does.
I can imagine a lot of coffee was getting drank at those times, a lot of sleepless nights, and a lot of stimulation levels were pumping.
But they did it.
They did it. Yeah. So, Gretchen, you've advised teams at Gartner, KPMG, Alex Partners, Tony Scott Group, right now at Ankura, getting budget sign offs at board level. I'm sure every manager, cybersecurity consultancy owner would love to know when it's needed, how do you get clients to spend more money? How do you get budget sign offs? Any kind of hints or tips you can give us there?
Sure, absolutely. These are very hard lessons learned. When you're a cybersecurity leader, let's say that we're managing a team in cybersecurity and get promoted, and it's your first time to be in front of your leadership committee, and then they may invite you to go to like quarterly board meetings or something to that effect. And what you quickly discover is that the board has very little tolerance for mistakes, for miswording things, for really what they consider as like poor communication. They communicate differently. It's not that the way you've been communicating is wrong. It's just that they need different communication. And it can be a hard learned thing. I've worked with one client where the CIO told me that they were needed to move forward with replacing their CISO. And he was an incredible person and a very good cybersecurity individual. But in front of the board, he didn't realize that the way he was taken, the way he communicated was considered to be a bit too flippant. It was he got frustrated because they didn't understand his technicalese, and really in reaction, he just did not work well with the board. And so it had nothing to do with his skill set or his leadership. It just was his communication. And the board's like, next, they didn't want to hear from him again. And that can happen. And so understanding how to go into this right is very important. For me, a lot of that came through with work that I did in mergers and acquisitions. In M&As, before you make a deal, you do a due diligence, you do a review to understand, hey, what's this thing that I'm buying? Is it everything I hope for? Is it the right organization for us? And traditionally, there's always like a legal kind of review. There's a financial review. In the last 15 years, like it ramped up to being the IT review, maybe a security review, and nowadays a lot of times like an ESG review. So ESG being like a governance review of the organization to see if they're making good decisions as corporate leadership. So as we do these reviews, like as I got pulled more and more into these kinds of reviews of cybersecurity, you're talking with investors. So these investors will not be technical. That's your job. They don't want to hear it. They made it clear that they'd like maybe 2 pages in this very thick report, due diligence report, 2 pages on cybersecurity. And to create those 2 pages, I might have 50 pages of details behind it, but they don't want to see that. They just want to know the 2 pages, and they want to know that I understand what's in the 50 pages, but they don't want to see that. They just want to know that I'm confident because of what's ever in that. So this is the kind of challenge where you really need to learn to communicate. And hopefully you've got a good leadership team or you've got good partners in your due diligence who are willing to work with you to go, that's still too technical. They're not going to get that. What about that? So the first time I did one of these, the organization being purchased was financially distressed. So that means that, which is not unusual, they were up for sale because they were in a position where they needed more funds to operate and to get done what they wanted to strategically. So when your funds are tight, you're not necessarily going to do all the maintenance that you have to do. You're not necessarily going to fully staff your security group. You may withhold signing some contracts that are expensive, whatever the case is. But that's going to lead to security deficits for sure. So the first time I did one of these things, I put together this report that said basically, well, security of this group is terrible. It really is a mess. Once you get in there, you're going to have to spend $1 million to fix it and make it better. And they weren't thrilled, the folks who received this report, because people buying an organization, they want to make it more efficient. They want to make money off of it. They don't want to invest money in it once they've bought it. So they were really not pleased with me. So I had to learn another way to communicate it. So instead of just talking about like cost, and let's face it, those of us in security know there's always something that's going to need to get fixed, especially when funding has been tight. So I had to be able to change it into some sort of discussion around value and risk that would get folks interested in hearing more, but not scared away, because that was really the goal. And that's the challenge. And that's the thing that folks need to learn. And that's the skill set that I've been trying to develop and really share with other people is that skill set where, instead of talking about just the costs, and the costs are important, you go, if we make some of these improvements, those improvements to security may actually help us automate. And automating will make us more efficient. So maybe there's a bump up front with cost. After 2 years, your return on investment is positive and you're doing well. So that's a big deal. Or
Mm,
also maybe you find things like, gosh, these guys don't do any kind of automated password reset. That's a great example because if you put in automated password reset, you can often get rid of half your help desk. So in that case, you're not only adding value to security, but you're adding value to the entire organization using security as a force multiplier. And so when you tell these things to people, they suddenly realize this is more than a cost center because sometimes I'll talk with folks in board level positions and they go, I don't care about security. I'm like, you really should. They'll say something along the lines of, he's only 10% of IT, and IT is only 10% of our entire business. So do I really care about what I'm spending on security? And I can usually say, matter of factly, you do care about it, and you do care about how security is done well now because it impacts your clients, it impacts client loyalty, client lock-in, it impacts your ability to operate in a lot of settings. But beyond that, it can also, again, fixing it can make other parts of the business much more efficient because it really is in a force multiplier type of role. It can change like the dialogue, it can make things work better. And security is not the brakes on the car slowing the car down. That's not the goal. It never is. And the things we're asking you to fix, it's not because stop what you're doing. If anything, think of this a little differently. The brakes on the car are not there to slow you down. They're allow cars to go faster because if a car is going to go faster and faster, you surely do need brakes in order to ensure you're going to keep on the road, going to keep everyone alive. So it allows you to move faster if you're using the brakes right.
mm, mm.
So that's a
I,
way to think about it.
yeah, I think just to make sure I'm understanding. So basically, Gretchen, what you're saying is you're almost putting yourself in the other person's shoes, seeing it from their point of view. If it's a businessman or a businesswoman, their language isn't SQLi and cross-site scripting. Their language is maybe sounds a bit blunt, but their language is money. They're a business person, so you're kind of buying it in terms of money, quantifying it in terms of, let's say, customer lock-in. So you're almost just really thinking about it from the other person's point of view instead of your own.
Absolutely. Oh,
Mm,
you're absolutely right. And I've created a workshop that I do with some of our clients. And so this workshop is actually usually I'll do it with a mix of technology and cyber leadership and with non-technical leaderships and board members. But a lot of times organizations like mine, even beyond vulnerability assessment, will come in and we'll assess an organization's security. We might do a maturity assessment and we may do like a vulnerability and pen test assessment with it. But all these really represent like bottom up components of assessing risk. So, from a bottom up perspective, you can say these controls work well, these security controls and safeguards don't. You can say these are a list of like your top CVEs. This is the path that an intruder would take, all those kinds of things. But that's still bottom up thinking. And these
mm,
business folks are doing top down thinking. So we gather this intel bottom up wise. And then this workshop is meant to do top down, where I'll sit down with people and say something along the lines of what keeps you up at night? And to be more specific with them, I go, if you didn't have security, if security didn't exist, what things would you worry about would wreck your business? Because there's a lot of things that security does. And this teaches them to think differently. It also gives me a list of the things that are most concerning. So if it's some consumer driven business. I'll go, are you worried about your list of consumers and their activities getting out publicly? Are you worried about like your secret sauce, like your IP getting out? Are you worried about somebody's safety getting harmed? What are the things like this that you're going, and I could go on and on like that. What client that I work with is an energy producer. So they put electricity on the wholesale grid. So for them, if they are knocked offline and they cannot produce electricity, every day they don't produce electricity, they're losing, I think they told me $200,000.
yeah.
So if you've got that figure and you get executives to say, yes, if we can't produce electricity, it's a problem. And we go, what things go wrong? Not producing electricity will cost us that much. And we'll also probably, by the way, trigger an audit. So like energy department will look at NERC SIP, like regulations and go, looks like you're not following these. That may be an issue. And so you also have to like take people off of time doing productive work to do fix it work. So all these things will happen. And so they realize that all these things can go wrong. So you take this list of what their top fears are, and you then temper it based on what you found from that bottom up review. And the way we do it is pretty straightforward, where we take a look at different kinds of attacks maybe they faced or people in the industry faced and say, would all those things that we found that you're doing today, would they stop an attack? Would they prevent it? Would they allow you to detect it? Would they allow you to quickly recover from it? If the answer is no or partially, then it means you're not doing enough to maybe stop those top-down concerns we found. And that deficit is where you explain to people, this deficit, this is where you have to focus your time. It's that difference between the things that keep you up at night and the things you're doing to help you sleep better at night. It's really, those are the differences. And once you show that to people, they go, fine, great. Now, what do we have to prioritize so I don't have to worry about that thing as much? And that's really, it doesn't sound complicated because theoretically it's not, but getting people comfortable with the terms, getting them to come together, showing them how this works so that you've got the technology people that are able to make fixes and show the improvements. So it's not just like hot air, and having the top level folks ask the right questions going forward so that they can show that they've understood why this thing needs to be done and they're really interested in hearing your answer.
Yeah, no, thanks, Gretchen. Thanks for that, Gretchen. And also, as well, and you say it's not complicated, but I think maybe for you it's not, but I know it's something that not everyone does well, and I think it is a real skill. I think it really is, and I think for any pen testers listening that think, "Oh, why should I do that? My job's to pen test." If I take what you're saying about the communication skill is to put yourself in the other person's shoes and make them see the benefits for them. I think if I do that exact thing for penetration testers, well, if they imagine a world where more vulnerabilities are getting fixed, their value is more realized, their day flows better, they're going to be happier as well, aren't they? So it makes sense for all sides, doesn't it?
Yeah, and so the thing that I'm saying is straightforward. Is just the concept of top down meets bottom up. Like that. Beyond that, how you do that can be complex to work out. But that part makes sense. It's understanding it that way. But so our pen testers have actually been critical in this. I have to ask my pen test lead a lot of questions to understand how his report contributes to this. And without his encouragement, without his inclusion in this discussion, this is impossible. Otherwise, it's just like more theoretical about what could go wrong. What is maturity is really about, risk, and risk is about what could. Now, what is wrong now, but what could go wrong in the future. So the what is now piece is critical. And so it's really something I've had to cultivate with my folks internally, my pen test team, because they have to have a pretty integral role in helping us understand if this attack happened today, what's the likelihood the damage would really happen these folks are worried about. And so this is really asking these guys to step out of their testing hat and put on instead like more of an analytical business hat to go, I guess if these things happen and these happen in sequence, this really would happen. This is not just a theoretical vulnerability. This is a thing that could happen. Okay, cool. Let's get that across to these guys because they need to understand it. So this is very much something that pen testers need to understand. And to really be driving more value, they need to think about what really will happen. How do I take this and explain that this attack, which is pretty common for you guys or people in your industry, your geography, whatever, this attack, if it happens, you are less likely than others to defend against it. And I say than others because who doesn't like a little peer pressure thrown in? Because if you're a pen tester and you've worked with a lot of organizations, you have a pretty good feel, even if it's like just anecdotal, of what a good organization looks like and what a more troubled organization looks like. And it's okay to use that comparison to explain to people why this is vital for them right now.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think as well, I know I might get a bit of pushback for saying this, but if I take it right back to the beginning, what, as a pen tester, what am I doing it for? I'm doing it because I want to improve security postures for as many organizations as I can globally. And if I'm awesome at finding vulnerabilities, but I don't talk to anyone, not don't talk to anyone, but I can't explain them to anyone or I can't explain them to non-technical people, that is going to reduce my ability as a pen tester.
If you're awesome at finding them, but you can't put them in context, what this leads to is like vulnerability fatigue, like cyber fatigue. When people read in the news about an attack every day, the first one, they're like, wow, oh my gosh, and they're fully aghast by the 10th one. Okay, here's another one.
Okay.
So the idea is you may be great at finding these and they may be a big deal, but if you can't put them in context about why they're important and you can't work with folks to make them in a way that is more meaningful, you're just presenting another list. And even if there are 10 severe items that you point out that are such a big deal, and there were 10 last time or maybe 8, they'll think back, our company hasn't collapsed since then. So do I care? They get fatigued about worrying about it. Yeah. So you need to give it good context and you need to put it in terms that these folks can't ignore and can't feel like we're still here today. So I guess I'm all right.
Yeah, no, cool. Yeah. By the way, not saying that popping shells and privilege escalation and lateral movement, we're not saying that's amazing and we're not saying it's not massively valuable. It is. But
Absolutely.
the other bit is as well. But yeah, no, cool. Next question. Thanks for that, by the way. Report writing skills. And I know end clients for a pen test can pay a lot of money. I know for a full chain red team engagement, they can pay an absolute fortune. These things aren't cheap. But at the end of the day, all the end client gets, especially if they're non-technical, in their mind, all they're getting is a report for their money. We all know the value that goes into a pen test, but all they're getting is the report. What kind of tips and hints would you have in terms of actually producing a report, writing a report, piecing a report together?
And this is a great question. So report writing is a skill in itself, and report writing can take some time. For some groups to do it right, especially as they're refining their reports, it'll take as much time to write the report, if not more, than the testing took. And most testers would rather do testing than spend their time writing the darn report. Getting a good report format, refining it with folks that are going to be the recipients of it, and then sticking to that so that folks know what to expect time and again is going to be critical. And it's a method to cut down on burning cycles time and time again on doing the reports, just getting the template right the first time. But getting it right means understanding who the audience is for it. So there is a technical audience, hopefully. So again, with smaller organizations, a lot of times they may look at this report and they're not sure who to give it to as and who the right person might be to fix it. Ideally they'll find that person, but that is one level, is the technical reader, the person that will be able to address the patches needed on the network, on applications, bits like that. So you do have a technical reader. The technical reader is probably not the person who signed their name to a check or is the one who paid for this thing or had to come out of their budget. So that's the other audience. Another audience is the person whose budget this came out of, who signed off that, yes, let's do this, it's coming out of my budget, because that person needs to see some value too. And maybe you don't think that they do in that, well, I'm doing my job and delivering the report. But if this person can take the report and take some sort of summary version of it, and they may be a technical buyer, but they're not necessarily the first level technical buyer. But so if there's some summary you have together that they can use to explain the value to their boss, who then becomes a customer of yours by proxy in this case, then you really won. Because the idea is like they have to synthesize this work, the buyer, and they have to synthesize other things they're reading and put it together into some story for their boss. And their boss might be reporting up to their board or to the CEO about this stuff. So making sure that there's a way to take this technical information, summarize it about what things are you doing well with, where you've improved, what things are critical to get done, and why. One of the things that my pen testers and I have moved to is like the recommendation part, because a lot of these, other than fixing the findings, the vulnerabilities, may not include recommendations. When you see a number of vulnerabilities, you can often say these guys need to maybe fix their patching process, or they need to build in a change period just focused on vulnerabilities once a quarter, or you'll realize that they lack certain things in how they operate at a grander level. And so you may, for example, set up that, hey, in the short term, these are the vulnerabilities you really need to fix now. And you also in the short term need to fix your scanning because you're not picking these things up and you should. And you might say in a medium or longer term, you need to look at how you're doing patch management. You're looking at how you're evaluating and escalating vulnerabilities organizationally. So if pen testers can step back and go, why are they finding them? If it was my organization, what would I really think that they should do so that I'm not going to find these again next time? Because we love finding these things. It's like the search and the hunt, that's fun. But maybe let's find some new ones and not the same ones again. So what would they do or what would I do to avoid finding them again? And if you can do that kind of thing, you're not just helping the technical individual who has to fix the items. You're not just helping the person whose budget this come up out of, but then you're also helping potentially the CIO and the organization. And this will make you locked in much more so as a trusted partner and advisor. And if you're working with other people that may be in a position to fix the organization or do other kinds of discovery into the organization, like this could be a great way to cross over into that type of work for your.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. Just quickly as well, if non-tech, this is just a question from me, and I might be right, I might be wrong. Perhaps you can help me. Do you think non-technical folks would probably just almost read the summary, or just because they're not going to probably go into the depth? So it's almost less is more, maybe, or simplification is key. Or
I would generally think that they will not read anything past like the front 2 pages if that's like the summary of it. And they shouldn't necessarily feel like they have to. They may put their thumb in the deck and just go and just go through and go, yep, looks like a lot of stuff in there. They might look to see if there's a table with colors in it. So they go, oh, these are red, these are bad. So they may literally thumb through it to look for like the colors or the things like that. And that's okay because then they can go, let me ask about these again later. But the first 2 pages being the summary, the non-technical bits are pretty key. And that's the stuff that I'm saying is like really like you're saying as well, maybe like less exciting to write, but so important. And maybe even in some regards more important the first time you work with a client, because this is the stuff that defines like, look, see, we provided you value, and this is how you're going to make use of that value. Because again, like I'm the one who signed off on the contract maybe. And so I'm saying, look, see, like to my leadership, wow, these guys, look, they're saying that these things have been here. And boy, this is really a big deal. And doing a pen test right and having these results in a way that me, as maybe a less technical leader, could really digest them and not only just digest them myself, but explain them to others is a big deal. It's funny. A couple of years ago, I was doing some cybersecurity reporting for a client, and I showed them the equivalent again of a 2-page summary of
Mm.
our finding entirely in non-technical terms,
Okay.
and they liked it and they found it interesting, but I got a ho hum sort of sense from them. I sat back with my technical folks that were with me, and we were thinking about what we could do differently that may be able to like zhuzh it up, make it just a little more intriguing for them
Yeah.
so
Okay.
that they could feel like they're part of the game. And what we did was we actually wound up adding screenshots for basically like terminal work. So like we said, look, if you can see here, we entered this prompt in and you can see here the output from it. And we just had it as basically an illustration in this summary piece, and they loved it. They glommed onto it. It was like they felt like they were just put into the 1990s movie Hackers, where they're like, I'm part of it now because I'm looking at like a terminal screen. And it was like, so we didn't put the words around it in any more technical terms. We just said, here in this example on the screen, you can see that when we entered this command in to look for such and such, we found this kind of stuff present. And just sometimes, again, while they want to read the non-technical bits, sometimes they want to feel like you're not just talking to them at the level of puppets on a string or something like that. You're talking to them like adults too.
Yeah.
Because sometimes technologists will be like, oh, let me explain it to you in the simplest terms. So that's fine sometimes, but it's also for you not to dumb it down too much. So they want to see that, look, see, they are going in and looking at code in this way. They do have Kali Linux installed, and they are actually looking at these research like services because I can see the results from this or that service out there. So don't dumb it down when you make it non-technical. Give them like components so they can feel that technical stuff is in there and it's baked in, and let them, if they want to ask questions, have enough there that they can ask you questions intelligibly so that maybe they'll become a smarter consumer for it.
Brilliant. So you've just completely removed like the them and culture from that process. Then you've made them really feel like you're all together on one team.
Ideally, yeah, but they have to be ready to meet you there. It's not like you can do this every time. It's not like every client is ready to gauge on that fact. You can lay out there, this is something we've done with other clients and they've really gotten a lot out of it. And I'm going to present it to you now. And they may not be, they may have something else going on and they can't really focus on it. But if you can get them to engage in it, and a lot of times you can, but not always, then you can get them to really become a smarter consumer of these things. And any kind of organization wants smart, well trained consumers. Consumers like that feel like you're partnering with them and not
Yeah.
just selling to them.
Yeah.
And like when you lose that link, a lot of times that's when you lose that real loyalty that your customers have. And so this is whether you're internal doing testing or you're part of an organization that does testing for other companies, this is just a way to think about it that again, making it non-technical is great, but still offering a glimpse into how the technology creates the storyline you're providing is just a way to offer somebody a glimpse into being a smarter consumer of the report.
Yeah, definitely. Just to go back a few sentences as well, you mentioned about sometimes technical people can be like, I think essentially a little bit patronizing, which I think is true, which I think is true. I think is so true. So really just ultra self-awareness and just not, let's say, not making them feel stupid.
Yeah, it's of course. And it's, I mean, we've all been to like hacker conferences and there's always somebody smarter at the hackathon or whatever. And it's we're all expecting we're a little bit Mr. Robot, but there's some other Mr. Robot out there that's going to humble us. I've done a lot of this in the past too. But so that humbling feeling, clients are already going to get that because they're relying on you for something they themselves know they can't do. But so that's out there. But it's to them, they feel like they're approaching the wizard in Wizard of Oz. And there's the curtain and there's this lightning and there's this craziness. And they're just like, oh wow, okay. Until the wizard behind it is revealed and he's just some dude hiding underneath something out there. It's like that kind of thing where it's cool. Be vulnerable. Let them see that you may be the wizard here, but you're just also some dude or some woman that's presenting this information. And
Yeah.
that's okay too. So that's exactly right. Like feeling intimidated does not build the same relationship or provide the same insight as being a little vulnerable and being able to take the time to accept that maybe the way you're explaining it could be wrong and maybe you need help from the person receiving the message to make sure that they're getting it and that you're asking them questions too to see if they really appreciate what they're getting out of it.
Yeah. No, love it, love it. I think the key as well is the phrase we always use in recruitment is keep the goal in mind. Whatever emotions are going on, whatever kind of if there's a bit of a them and us culture, what you're trying to avoid. I think if we're I always say it back to myself: if you keep the goal in mind, sometimes it can keep you on track, if you like.
And there's it's that was actually solidified in a model that was created like in the early 90s. A professor, I think his name was Victor Pasili out of University of Maryland, put together a framework called GQM, goal question metric. And so for any program, like technical program you're creating, you should figure out ways to measure it. And like in the early 90s, there was a lot of move towards more measurement, more like objective ways to figure out what it is we're doing and how to get value. And so goal question metric says, think about what your top goal is, your
Yeah.
top couple goals are, and then think about what are the questions I would need to ask to see if I really achieved that goal. So is my organization highly vulnerable to attacks? If that's one of the questions to ask, because my goal is to consistently operate, for example. So how do I know if my organization is vulnerable to like severe attacks? I need to measure X, Y, and Z. And so that's where it gets to this thing that you're talking about as well, which is you keep the goal in mind, and that goal should even inform the way you define your work, because you're define your work by saying our work is about answering questions, and answering questions is about achieving things that we can measure. What are those things? So absolutely.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Thank you. And I think we've answered some of this, but I'm gonna ask you anyway, just in case there's anything else. But what common or the biggest mistakes pen testers make, or even cybersecurity managers make when it comes to reporting or getting budget sign-offs?
So let's see, when it comes to mistakes, it's not about, of course, like I think mistakes that pen testers make, because this is not about what we're talking about, is not about the quality of the pen testing, because it really is, I have no doubt, good pen testing is good pen testing. Unearthing these findings is just miraculous and vital. The things that can go wrong really, I think, often relate to context. Missing context, or simply just folks have like limited context about why we're doing it and what it's really going to achieve. So some of this is going to be the folks leading the pen test need to think about the context more. The folks who are buying it, the folks who are selling it to the folks buying it, need to think about context. For pen testers, a lot of times, like to see their clients get the most out of it, we've talked about before how it's great to understand what's been fixed previously. Why have you not fixed the previous things? Are these just not fixable? Is there value in reporting the same thing again? We need to understand that, but we also need to understand what's the thing that prompted right now being the pen test. Was there some major change in the organization? Was there an incident that happened? Is this just a periodic thing that we have to do for reporting and compliance? So all these things should impact how you do the test, how you communicate the test. If there was an incident recently, you need to understand where folks are with regards to the incident. If they haven't fully recovered from it, or if they're still in the process of rebuilding their environment, if ransomware knocked them out, for example, then you need to work with them to understand this might not be the time for pen testing. Maybe you can do some automated scanning, but not pen testing, because pen testing could slow down your progress towards fixing the organization. The things that would come to reporting and come to setting up pen tests that's vital is context, and deciding when to put down your foot around the context. Because again, if your customers ultimately no, do it now, and you're just like, this is just not the right time for you, you have to decide, do I want to do this anyway? Because I think this client in the long term is doing the right things. Do I want to just tell them, no, I think it's worth your time? And I think that us slowing you down will just implicate us in some regards, not the right timing. So you have to think about things like that. You have to think about what resources are available for you to work with, and how you can make the best use of those resources. So as you're thinking about the reporting and the timing and how much effort it'll take, is the organization you're assessing really committed to doing this? Are there IT or security folks free to work with you on this? Are they going to have people or cycles available to address things if you find immediate concerns, to address the severe things right after you're done? But these kinds of contexts will affect how you handle your reporting, how you handle the relationship, how you handle the timeline of your testing. And I think that these are the things that are important. It's just don't be afraid of context. Pen testers that I work with a lot of times may be afraid to bring these things up with clients. Like they're just like, they're the client, they want it. And then they'll be like huffing and not happy about doing it. But I'll ask my pen testers, if I pick this up from them, why do you seem like this is something that you're not excited about? Usually new clients are excited. And then they tell me, go, let me tell the client that, or let's decide about the right way, or if it's the right thing to tell the client. Sometimes maybe it's right, maybe it's not. But I find a lot of times these guys are, suit yourself if this is what you want to do. And that doesn't help anybody in the long term. And you have to risk asking these questions and getting the answer back from your client. The worst thing that they do is disagree with you. And that's fine if they disagree with you. You know your business, they know their business. You know what you have to do to operate, they know what they have to do. And maybe that difference will highlight something important for you. But this thing will lead, if you ask these questions and don't shy away from putting them on these bigger pictures about, is this the right way to do it? Is this the right time? Do you really have the right resources? If you don't do that, you're not going to get the same value for your work or your report. And you may find like less job satisfaction and burnout faster. So
Yeah.
those are big statements, but I think from what I've seen, they're really critical.
They are, yeah. So don't just necessarily be a yes man or a yes woman. Actually push back on your clients. In the long run, I think they'll probably respect you more for it as well, because you are genuinely adding more
Absolutely.
value. Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. Even if it's a frustrating conversation and you go back to your desk grumbling, you've done something very valuable.
Mm.
And next time you work with these folks, they will be better prepared and you will have like fewer headaches with them. But it's a big deal. And I will thank you. Everybody will thank you for doing this thing because it's stepping out of like the initial and primary skill set to doing something that's a different skill set that maybe is more vital as you grow your career.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and like I say, it is a new skill set, and I think the first time you do anything, you're probably not going to be great at it. In my experience, like I say, the first time anyone does a pen test, if they're great now, they perhaps weren't the first on the first go. So I think some key skills you said there: communication, a massive one. I mean, listening skills are going to be imperative. Essentially, we're talking about qualifying the client as well, because by the sounds of it, every client's very different. Their needs are very different. Their attitude's very different. And just to go back a few other questions as well, you mentioned about on the reporting about a template. Would you advise maybe having a template for qualifying a client?
Oh, yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. We hand our clients like a sheet that we've developed over time and refined that we'll ask them technical questions about, like, for example, like how many AD domains do they have? We ask them questions about, like, of course, IP ranges. We ask them like all kinds of things like that. But these templates can benefit from asking simple questions about like timing. Like, when was the last time you did one of these things? And the thing is, this information is all very sensitive. Sometimes you can't just send this in an email and get an email back. Sometimes it could be conversation and on-site discussion, or it could be using like a secure like web center or all these kinds of documents you're developing. But you ask questions about again fixing things and patching cadence potentially, and asking things about which of these compliance domains you have to subscribe to. Are you doing this for PCI DSS? Are you doing this for another industry program or for compliance with SEC regulations or something like that? You can ask if it's prompted by an incident or have there been attacks that have been successful. It's okay to ask these things, and these qualifiers can just make you a better tester and might hone what you look at. They may have internal resources that only look at part of their domain, and so you hone it to focus on a different part. Just like from that technical perspective of honing your work, understanding the reason they're doing this may as well help you hone your testing and hone your conversations with them to get more out of this stuff.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think another thing you mentioned as well, another word that I like is actually when it goes from being a client relationship to an actual partnership. And when you get that, it's key. And also, it's probably, I don't know what it's like for you day to day, but I know for myself, I've got some clients that are true partners, but not all of them. And I think you've probably got to be realistic. Not every client relationship is going to be like that utopia, perfect partnership. It just doesn't work like that. You can get some, then it makes life a lot nicer.
Yeah, yeah. Some are like a marriage, and
Yeah.
some are like a fling. Okay, and for those that are like a marriage, like a partnership, like that marriage takes work. It doesn't just take one work one time. It's the relationship takes updating, and sometimes that client that you're partnering with, it might be a little more difficult, and sometimes it'd be easier. But it's like a marriage
Yep.
where you and your partner may at times differ on opinions. And that's okay. You just come back and you go, hey, here's the thing. I brought you flowers, maybe not flowers in a business relationship, but let's step back and talk about what happened and what we can avoid. So some are like that, and some are just like a quick fling where just fix this for me and move on. And then you go, okie dokie, I'll do that too. You're right, absolutely. Some of them are long term, some of them are very quick. Sometimes you may have a couple clients that are like that. I'm not saying that you should be polyamorous in your personal life, that's on you, but I'm saying in your professional life, ideally, if you're doing this work externally, you've got a couple clients that you're really partnering with and thinking about that being a long-term relationship,
Mm.
maybe akin to a marriage or something similar.
I don't know what you can and can't say it here, but is there ever a time to walk away from a client, and do you ever do that? Or
To walk away from a client, there's times to walk away from opportunities. So whether it's to walk away from a client or not, that's a different story, I think. And yeah, like I've tried to point out, absolutely, that there's sometimes that opportunities you can see that if we pursue it, it's not going to lead to the result the client wants. And I don't want the client to contest something, meaning just feel like this is not what I found, or this is not what I want, or this isn't done. You never finished the work. So you did finish the work. Everything that you've prescribed in your statement of work, in your proposal, whatever you've done, but they don't see it that way because maybe their environment is dynamic, it's changing, and they go, "We tested it, but that was something that was old. You've got to test the new thing. We said we tested it once is once, guys,
mm.
or we tested it and it was actually very harmful. So now you have to help us fix this thing or that, and they didn't contract to fix the things. But there are times where you pick that up and you're like, that's not going to add value. But that's just thinking about some pen test examples. I could think of other client examples where a client brought up, like through a relationship that a colleague had, that they wanted us to help them with some planning around like safeguards and security controls. But what they really wanted for us to do was something that we weren't the right partner. And I just had to admit that while I'd like to work with them and they seem like great individuals, I just, we're not the right group. It was the service that is not where we specialize. We can do that, but usually part of a bigger service. So if
Mm.
it's just, if they wanted us to do maybe a very basic sort of vulnerability assessment, but they wouldn't let us do pen testing, perhaps I'd be like, we'd really like to go and work with clients at a bigger level. If that was the case, then I might say this isn't the right opportunity. I think you'd be better for a firm that commoditizes the pen testing
Mm.
or commoditizes the vulnerability work more than we do, where we try to truly add more of a value add than treat it as a commodity. So that could be an example. Yeah, but
Yeah,
that's a great
yeah,
question.
yeah. No, thanks. I think in the B2B world in general, I think that's the case. If I think about it from a recruitment perspective, there is times to walk away from business, choose not to do it.
Well,
Obviously, you.
I can't afford to lose my pen test team. I love them, and I think they're like the leader of our team has done an incredible job to build a really effective team and to
Yeah.
get them doing the right kind of work. The thing is, if I become aware that doing this work for this client is going to like really upset my pen test team, sometimes I'm like, we still need to do it. But if it's going to be again and again that this kind of work is something we're doing and we're going to lose our pen test team over it, I don't really want to do that either. I want them to feel valued like anybody else. And if there's some reason that they just feel like this work is not right and we keep doing it and they're burning out on it, then I need to really, as a leader, I should be circumspect a bit more and go, why is this making them so upset and unhappy? And if I bring in some other pen testers instead of these guys, if I could actually find some, which is difficult without a good recruiter, ahem, ahem, but am I going to upset the new ones too? So I've got to think about how this really fits together and whether turning this down is the right choice. And what does it mean about the way I'm respecting these folks? And turning things down should really trigger some kind of review to go, why did we turn it down? Is this something that we'll turn down regularly because we don't want to be in that business? Should we partner with somebody and just have them subcontract it? Is it just that clients need to be better informed so they don't ask for this thing we turned down? Like, what's the thing? Because it's okay to occasionally turn things down, but it's really, it should trigger like an internal discussion or some thought about why and
Mm.
how do we, who are we worrying about right now when we turn it down?
Yeah, yeah, cool. Balanced approach by the sounds of things. Yeah, cool. Okay, Gretchen, next question from me. The security space is obviously really hot. I know probably the same in your friendship and social circles. I think people looking in are often fascinated by infosec or cybersecurity in general. But yeah, I know things are busy. I know from what I'm seeing, the visibility I've got on the jobs market, things, whatever the press try and say, things do still really seem really busy. But having said all that, we're not without challenges. What challenges do you think we're facing now, and what challenges do you think we're likely to be facing in the near future?
It sounds like overall with cybersecurity. And I think that the challenge for cybersecurity is the market is changing. And cybersecurity, it's not like something that experts in cybersecurity or people working at daily say, yeah, I know it's always changing, right? Isn't that the constant is that it's changing? I think it's changing in some day to day can change as new attacks happen and things like that. But I think there's some larger, more tectonic shifts that are going on. And we're going to see some changes, I think, in the market and how that makes us engage with the work we do and with industries. One of the things I see is like a lot of the work that, and a lot of the companies that do pure play security, where they simply offer us like, we're going to secure your network, we're going to do this one testing piece. Those folks, I think, are becoming more and more commoditized, where their work isn't getting the same dollar value necessarily as it once did, because it's easy to it's easier to compete in that space. It's there's a lot of need for it, but I think that we're seeing more and more organizations that are trying to combine these things to really solve client problems and answer questions for clients. So like more we're seeing folks getting more engaged in security and going, okay, you're securing my network, but overall, I need to know, does this service make sure that I'm going to be operating securely overall? Is it my entire ecosystem protected? Is my security helping keep my information private? Is my security helping to prevent fraud? So things like that. So like really the bigger questions, you're getting to see like more mature privacy market where privacy software is engaging and incorporating components of security in what they do. And so again, we're seeing bits like that, and fraud solutions are becoming more holistic. So security is still there, and it's just becoming, I think, part of a bigger story, which it should do. It doesn't mean that the security leader will, which they've generally just more recently gotten a seat at the table, at the big table, that they're going to be stepped away. No, they not only are they holding on to it, it's becoming solidified now, but they need to think at the bigger picture. They can still be technical, but think, hey, when I'm doing this work here for this company in security, do they have consumer data? Is that a big part of why we're securing it? Is that going to inform like where I deploy more security versus other like less security. So those are the big shifts that are happening that are, I think, a bit more tectonic because we see AI coming in, we see discussions of quantum this and that, and these things are a big deal, and they're tools and they're also threats to like everything everybody's doing, and that's fine. But think about those threats. It's not like just a small threat, like it's creating a vulnerability. It's a like societal threat, or deep fakes are becoming a big deal because it's hey, it's what a great way to fish somebody potentially in the future. Things like that are happening, and so we have to think bigger because we can't keep up with every little small thing. We have to think about these tectonic bigger topics because those are the that's where we need to meet people and that's what's becoming expected of us. Industry wise, there's some industries that have become more mature. Banking you expect generally to be pretty mature. There's a lot of really good regulations out there, but there's still things that happen, but it's becoming much more mature with security. And then there are other industries that have been like off the hook that are becoming much more engaged in security now. So I do a fair amount of work in higher education. And for example, I've got a team that's engaged with Stanford University where we do quite a bit of privacy work and some cybersecurity work. And so when you think of universities, you don't necessarily think of large data sets. You don't think of necessarily security attestations, et cetera. And that's because for a long time, all these different new burgeoning laws have given higher ed and other public institutions waivers. But that's not happening as much anymore. Like with the new laws in California, if you're a public university, let's say you're LA, you have to follow the same privacy laws as a private business if you're UCLA. What's unusual is that for that law, the private higher ed institutions like Stanford are still given a waiver, which is the actual opposite in Virginia with their new laws. Is that if you're at Virginia Tech as a public university, you still get a waiver from some of the rules. But if you're a private university in Virginia, then you don't get the waivers. So it's a bit confusing. But the thing is, universities, many of them do research, and they may have research data sets that have a million people or tens of millions of people or even more than that of data. And they may hold on to that data not just for the length of time needed for HIPAA, which is a couple of years, or for AICPA accounting type standards. It might be longevity related, so it might be 20 years or your entire lifetime they're holding on to it. Technology changes, so we need to think about security of this kind of data set. Universities are about collaboration, so while you may be doing things that are like very private or students need to maintain their private life even though they're using university, we still have to think how are we protecting that email for those individuals? Somebody wanders on campus and buys something from your campus store, goes to a game, they use their credit card, whether it's that, so they're a member of the community, they're an administrator, so they're an employee, or faculty, which may or may not be employees. How do we protect these people appropriately while still not doing anything to prevent a really good environment of collaboration? Because that's why we go to school is to learn, but also to test ourselves and challenge ourselves through collaboration. So we're seeing that kind of shift too to new industries.
Yeah, yeah, cool, cool. Yeah, there's always that constant battle between practicality and security as well, and I think you touched upon it there. Within a uni, you don't want to stunt the collaborative element.
Absolutely. It becomes like shadow IT, shadow other things go on. If everything's locked down, there's no way to do your work. I can guarantee you, and we've all seen it, it's the need for me to guarantee it, that somebody will use non approved cloud storage. Somebody will use their like Gmail or something like that because it's working better. People will always do that. And that's a little shadow something is okay because it promotes ingenuity, which can drive innovation, but too much is just too much, right?
Yeah.
And so this is how you get to an environment where somebody's shouting down rules and everybody's okay, let's avoid those rules by not using the technology or the solutions available to us through the institution, whatever it is.
Yeah, cloud security. I think we could probably do a whole other pod on cloud
Of
security.
course.
Yeah, thanks for that, Gretchen. Board level discussions. Not many of us have been there. I know that the board level discussion, those three words probably make most of us feel nervous, but you've got a lot of experience yourself in this area. So for anyone listening, maybe they've been newly promoted, maybe they're at management level, or maybe they are actually going into boardrooms to have those types of discussions. Any silver bullets of information or tips in general? Or maybe they're a seasoned professional just looking to improve. Any tips for them as well?
Yeah, the tips would be that certainly it's helpful to look up who the board members are first. LinkedIn, some other source like that, because you should try to find out if they've got a technical background, if they've got maybe an accounting background, a business background, what it might be. You may be presenting to the board or just, for example, to like the audit and finance committee or to other committees, the risk committee, and understanding who's a part of that is important. Maybe there are people with a really good technical background, and that therefore it's going to be a very different discussion. So understanding who these folks are is going to be pretty critical to going in to speak with them because you're going to do your homework, right? So that's pretty critical to it. But it's also making sure that you're engaging them correctly. If you're on their agenda, you're one of 20 things on their agenda for that day. And so they need to hear the story quickly and they need to hear it concisely because they're not the ones who are going to be doing the budgeting. They're going to be the ones who are just like nodding in the right way and allowing your leadership to then make the good budgeting decisions. So you think about, I know who these people are. I know what the quick question is that I need to answer for them, or I know what it is like the one thing they really worry about that I could tell them.
Yeah.
And then you allow them to ask you questions if they have them. And if not, you just move on. You don't have, if you're given 15 minutes out of their whole day, maybe they don't need the whole 15 minutes. That's okay too. You don't have to keep talking about it. If you answer the question, they seem satisfied, they're probably satisfied. Just read the room, understand who's in the room, and don't waste their time because you're one of many topics. And even if this seems like an earth shattering thing to you, if they are covering many other topics, this is just one of the many things that they're looking at. And so don't necessarily expect you to be the most important person of their day. And just remember that and be smart, be quick.
Are they scary?
Sure, they can be, right?
Cool. Thank you for that. Thanks for that. Which book have you read that's had the biggest positive impact on your career so far from a self development and growth standpoint?
I don't know if there are any books that had really a negative impact on my career yet, but maybe there are. But I do read a lot. I publish a fair amount. As of late, like I've got a team that had some fairly junior people and some more senior, and I'm trying to get them all to write, which means I'm doing some writing with them. And the reason I bring that up is because I've said this on causes recent as yesterday is to be a better writer, you got to be a better reader. So if you want to express yourself better, whether it's in pen test reports, in front of the board, but even if most of what you do is going to be in numbers, there's still a story behind those numbers you have to have in your head. So to be a better writer, storyteller, I guess, be a better reader. So reading is not bad. If you don't like reading itself, get the book, get an audio, do something like that. But one of the books I'm going to suggest is I've got it in front of me here, so I didn't forget who wrote it. It is not at all even slightly a new book. I read it. My copy is like highly dog-eared. Geez, when was this first put out? It was put out in 1981, and I read it the first time in probably about 1994. It's called Getting to Yes. So it's a book about negotiation skills. It's two folks wrote it, Roger Fisher and William Ury. William Ury, I think of as the key writer because he wrote a follow-up that he liked even better called Getting Past No. And I think that understanding negotiation is key to understanding other people and it's the key to having a good day and not a bad day sometimes. Because leaders are funny, right? They do exactly what we tell them to. Not necessarily what we want them to, but what we tell them to. It's straightforward. Program them to do this, they do that. And people are not like that, unfortunately. So we need to understand how to get people to agree with us. And like I said, the follow up book, which is called Getting Past No, I think is even better because getting people to go yes is hard, but getting them to not say no is sometimes even harder. So how do you get people to, when they're saying no to you, to back up and go, hold on, wait, maybe I'm asking this wrong. Maybe we have to ask it differently. Is that how you get to yes or how you get past no? Is it that you have to get them to agree with you on small pieces so they can see the bigger pieces? Is it you yourself have to bend in your thinking? But these things affect everything. I've read a lot of technical books. I've certainly taken part in writing technical things as well. But to me, like this book was a bit more monumental, even early in my career when I was still mostly doing programming, because it really just affected the way that I phrase things and I put things into practice, whether my personal relationships or my work one. So old book, it's gone into reprint a bunch of times, and it's not neither of these are long books, and the I think that if somebody wanted to write an abridged version, it would probably be both books, maybe together 10 pages. But what's really valuable is like the authors put all these stories about it because they're like negotiation professionals. And they go this one time, and as you hear what they're telling you, it just becomes real. It's like their principles. I don't remember what they are anymore, but I know that I incorporate them because I think back in some of the stories that they have and some of the little quips like just come to mind. And so that's what I think makes a good business book. If I had to pick a technical book, I'd say CISSP for Dummies. When I think I took the CISSP in 2003,
Okay.
and I bought the big tome, the big book, and I remember opening and just being like, I'm not going to read this, but I don't want to read this. I need to get this certification. What am I going to do? And then I don't know if it still exists, but there was CIA for Dummies, which was maybe a fourth of the weight of that book. And I read it and it said, here are the things you really need to know. Here's the things that are tested. And I'm like, I wasn't new to security. I was taking this test because I just needed to get my certification. But that proved to be the thing. So sometimes the thick tome, which looks awfully good on the bookshelf, is great, but It's when your goal is to just enhance your career by getting a certification. Sometimes you need to get that publication that cuts through the shaft just to get to the wheat in the center. And that's
Yeah.
really sometimes a good way to look at it. So those are my books for you.
Very good. So getting to yes. Getting to
Yeah,
yes.
and then and getting past no.
Getting past
Yes.
no. And yes, CISP, I'm sure most people are aware. Management certification, would you class it as that?
CISSP, I think it's a great generalist security certification.
Mm.
Sometimes one of the best things you can do, depending on your trajectory, is to show folks that you understand a variety of terminology and a variety of concepts in security. And that's what things like CISSP do versus like CEH or some of the other more hacker and vulnerability oriented certifications. So there are these ones that go, hey, it's a generalist thing, and it'll make sure that if I bring you in and you've got the certification, you and I can speak the same language of security. I can talk about different forms of encryption, and we're talking the same language using the same terms. So that's like things like CISSP or CISM, for example.
Mm.
But when I get to things like CEH, again, they do confer a certain amount of, hey, we have the same terminology. But even more than that, it provides a concept of, at a bare bones, you've played around with these technologies in these settings. And we're getting into certifications and talking about them. Simply put, depending on your role, depending on where you are in your career, as far as if you're trying to be specialized or do something that you may want to appear more of a generalist, these things are not necessarily designed to be your full source of education. Your sort of full source of education might be through degree programs, through just playing around online. They might be through your work experience, but these things are just a way to put a stamp on it and show people that, yep, we're like you and I, and that's valuable because now you know how to use me in this way or that way.
Yeah, no, thank you. Certifications is one that gets everyone going. I did a post yesterday. I want to say debate, but I think it was there was some arguments going on there, like about 50 comments worth of arguments, debates. So
Absolutely.
always gets people
And
excited.
so, yeah, and I mean, I have a son who just graduated from school and he's in a technology role. And his boss was like, why don't we pursue a certification? And so he said to me, what would you suggest? And so while his role is a bit more general, like his degree focused more on data science and he's doing some like data science work, but also some general IT work. I gave him a list of 4 or 5 that I thought would be things he'd enjoy, things that would be good now for his career, and maybe give him value over the longer runway than others. So some of the ones I did were actually much more around, again, like hacking and pen testing, because I know my son and I know he likes to do like open world video games where you're discovering things and finding flaws to exploit. And I'm like, hey, that's great. And I think that also background in hacking, white hat hacking, and pen testing, there's skills that you could build a whole career around that, a very good career.
Yeah,
Or even if you've got that background and you get into some sort of technology or cyber leadership, it's a great fallback that gives you a perspective that is like few others about what can go wrong, not just theoretically. So I gave him some examples of that as a couple of the recommendations. And then I gave him a couple of cloud engineering ones because cloud is not going anywhere. The flavors of cloud out there, maybe he'll get something related to Azure or AWS, but the specifics only go so deep. It's still learning about cloud engineering and the whole world of like virtual everything in cloud is not going away. So
right.
not a bad skill to learn either. Personally, I hope he keeps to more of the hacker type of skill sets because I enjoy them more and
Mm.
I think he'd enjoy them more, but we'll see. It's still up to him.
Yeah, pen tester in the making.
Hope so. I'll give him your information in a couple more months.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
I'll crack on because I know I'm keeping you well over time. Obviously, your team at the minute always manages pen testers right now. Ankura, what main characteristics do you see that enable individuals to become successful pen testers in today's market?
Wow, that's a great question. When I joined Ankura, the team that was doing pen testing, they were struggling a bit. We kept up with some of the work, but from like end to get out a report took quite a long time because they just weren't necessarily managing their pen testing resources well, client expectation, and some of the skill sets amongst the folks that were involved maybe needed a little refresher. As luck would have it, since then we have a new team. We would like to very much hold on to the team we have, which means working with them to get the best out of them and to get the best value means also making sure that they feel like they're part of the solution. So what makes a good pen tester, I think, is somebody that really, of course, has the technical skills, but also maybe has the flexibility to just think about new environments. There's always new technologies we confront, and having some inquisitiveness about those technologies and how to engage with them is pretty cool. Even if you're not just doing like new exploration into new vulnerabilities, this is still something you need to do. Is you can't expect to find and to face the same technology every all the time. So we very much would hope you find the wherewithal to still learn. So that's part of it. Part of it is time management. There's a lot of ways to dig deeper. But sometimes if you found what you need to find, you need to move forward. And if you're not given enough time by your leadership, you need to specify that. If they want you to move on to something else and you're not done, you need to have a discussion to go, if I stop now, here's what we miss out on. Time management, communicating around how much time you need and why is important. And then making sure that you eat your vegetables. Maybe writing the report is for you, your vegetables, and you'd rather not, but it's an important part of your diet. And finding a way to love those vegetables. Maybe it's just you hate broccoli, as I do. But so the thing is, but I do love spinach. So maybe it's just a reframing, but you have to eat your darn vegetables, so eat them. So that's part of it too, is like coming to terms with your darn vegetables and figuring out how to either incorporate the ones that you don't like or how to incorporate ones that you like better. So those are some key pieces. And then if you're in a consulting like role, an advisory role in pen testing, just be aware that folks in your organization may reach out to you for doing things that are not traditionally as focused on pen testing. They may have questions for you about, we're looking at this organization or that from a different perspective. And just could you tell us what you think, or you understand technology better than a lot of us? Could you help us understand this? So just you need to expect folks would take you out of your comfort zone versus if you like pen testing and you just really want to sit in pen test, you may be happier in an organization that's not purely advisory based. And that's fine too. So just think about the organization you want to be in, think about your vegetables, think about communicating your needs and your timelines so you can help your work keep moving and you can find enjoyment in the work you do without burning out.
Yeah, cool, cool, brilliant. Thank you. When, and last question from me, I know you're not hiring right now, but do you have any tips for mid to senior level pen testers that are listening that are perhaps looking to maybe join you in the future, or what type of pen testers would you like to meet when the time is right?
Well, great question. Like I mentioned, since I've joined the Mark Manuso-Giannis, just a name check, is this gentleman we brought in to lead our pen test team. And he's done a really good job of building a team. So for folks who have a pen test team in-house, I'd say do what you can to keep them happy. It can be difficult to find really quality pen testers and to keep them learning, keep them active. And so if you feel like you've got a great team, find ways to work with them to keep them employed because there are a lot of opportunities out there for pen testers and we want to make sure that we have folks that are happy to be where we are. And we want to make sure that we've got folks that are growing in their role. I'd say to the pen testers out there looking that when you're looking at companies, there are a number of opportunities you're going to get. You put your name out there, you send out resumes, you're going to hear back from folks. Just do yourself a favor and make sure it's the right opportunity for you. Part of it is certainly going to be compensation. And everybody should do a mark to market, as they call it, like a check to see Glassdoor or some other source, is the offer that you're getting reasonable? Because some organizations see this as a specialty and they may realize that the specialty may be rare and so therefore they have to pay more for it. Some may just see it as like that's another techie in that windowless room. So they may not realize that it's actually something that demands a premium. So make sure that financially it's right, but more than that, make sure that it's the right kind of group for you to stay in for as long as you want to be there. If you're somebody that wants to find upward mobility, is it the organization that has a lot of pen testers and needs somebody that can grow into a leadership role? Is it an organization that sees a career future beyond just pen testing? If again, this is something that you want to have in your tool suite, but something you want to incorporate at a higher level as you grow, cool, find that out. So just figure these things out. If you like to go to like events, like whether it's to like hackathons or to other events, ask the organization if they like to pay for that. Find these things out from an organization because I want to be asked these questions, and that's why I'm asking you to ask them. Because if somebody said, "Yeah, I like to present at conferences and I like to be on the cutting edge," some folks may be very comfortable with that, and somebody might say, "Yeah, I want to go to Black Hat." Somebody might say, "I'm in the DC area," that they want to go to ShmooCon and do something. I would be okay, cool. And so I have to decide if that's something that I want to budget for and keep them happy. Ask the things you need to find a way to keep yourself happy. If you individually work better or work better as a team, figure those things out too. Because I'm going to figure it out. If I'm replacing somebody in our team, I want somebody that is a good pen tester, but also works well with others. And maybe that's not something that you feel like is your top skill set that you want to develop now. And that's fine too. So these are the things. And if you want to get into the field, there are a lot of ways to get into it. A lot of folks got into it early on by just playing around and making mistakes and learning. As a rule of thumb, only break the things you own, please. If you develop a website, break it, get some bandwidth from AWS, create something there, you play around with that, hit it up. So that's ideally the way to do it. But play around and learn. Ask for help from others. This is a community. And if you find the right folks, they're going to want to give you tools. They're going to want to let you like learn from them. So there's ways to do it. And finding people that have that interest and are self learners, that's pretty cool too. And I love to find people that go, "What if?" and show me they're self learners. So being a self-learner is how you get into it. And it's also a way for people to get excited and see you as a standout.
Yeah, no, definitely. I agree. And I think it's definitely worth spending that bit of extra time on the front end because it's advantageous for the employer and for the pen tester long term. The last thing
Well,
anyone
and as a recruiter, I'm sure you can say that there are quite a few opportunities out there. And but again, it's you have to work with people you think are good candidates, and you have to fill positions with folks you think and hope are going to hopefully stay happy there, right?
and like I say, every company is very different, and cultures are very
Sure.
different. And yeah, no, you're right. It's worth spending that time on the front end, definitely. Gretchen, thank you. We've gone miles over time. I know you're a super busy woman, so thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure. I was excited to work with you. Just chatting with you in the last couple of days has been tremendous, and I certainly look forward to working with you as we move forward. This has been a pleasure. Thank you for including me in this.
No, likewise. It's been really good. Thanks for your time, and everybody, thank you for listening. And I'll see you all next week. Thank you.